Two people will join us online. First of all, I would like to introduce Katy Faust. Could we connect with Katy Faust, please?
Can you hear me? Hello?
So good that you could take part in our ceremony. Thank you very much, indeed.
Thank you
Katy
for
Faust
allowing me.
es fundadora y presidenta de Them Before Us. Katy Faust es una organización.
Katy Faust is the founder and president of Them Before Us, which is an NGO and international movement focusing on the defense of human rights of children. Her work focuses on promoting the right of every child to be raised with a father and a mother and presenting family as just questions for children. She is an international speaker and she is engaged in public debates. She discusses cultural and social topics, including topics such as differences between men and women and protection of children against commoditization. She has also participated in the design for edition for adolescents of Canavan of White Spoon Institute, a program about sex, gender, marriage, and relationships from the perspective of natural law. Her articles have been published in USA Today, Newsbook, and Federalist Public Discourse, All Magazine, Daily Signal, Washington Examiner, American Mind, and American Conservative. She is a member of the Advisory Council of Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. She read book Raising Children in a Awakened City. Katy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? How's the audio? Can you hear me?
The audio is maybe we will put a little higher. Okay.
Okay, good.
Un poco más alto el
How is that? Is that better? Perfect. It's an absolute joy. It's an honor to be able to join you today. This work to restore the family, to build these relationships that are integral to human flourishing is so important. And I'm grateful that you're giving your time and your attention towards focusing on this area, especially of motherhood. You know, I am a mother myself. I have 4 wonderful children. I always say I have 4 and I should have had more because they get better and better as they grow. And they make, even though there is a great sacrifice at the beginning when children are young, there is a long-term harvest that you reap as they become teenagers and young adults. And my life is so rich. Yes, because I'm doing important work in the world, but mostly because of the relationship that I have with my children, all 4 of my children, 3 biological children and 1 adopted child. They're all so different and their lives are going in wildly different directions. But the connection that we have with one another and the way that it enriches my life and my husband's life is not something that any career can give to a woman. I am an activist for children. And I know that you probably have some academics there and some scholars there, and maybe some feminist advocates who are talking about the importance of women. I am somebody that advocates on behalf of the child. So when I look at the human cost of the fragmentation of motherhood, what I'm talking about mainly is how reproductive technologies specifically, surrogacy in particular, has quite literally fragmented motherhood. And there's really, when I ask you, who is your mother and how do you know? When I ask people that, they'll give me a variety of different responses. They'll say things like, she is the woman who raised me. Or they'll say things like, I got my Italian heritage from her. Or they'll say, well, she's the one that gave birth to me. Or they'll say, she's the one that listened to me when I had my first breakup from my boyfriend when I was 13 and I was so devastated. Or they'll say, well, she's the one who gave me my green eyes. Or they'll say, she's the one that nursed me when I was young. All of these different aspects of motherhood are important to children. each one of those different characteristics is something that no other woman can give to the child. And so a lot of what I work on is critiquing the technologies that disintegrate mothers, often in the name of adult interest or adult desires. And so we've actually seen the trifurcation, the splitting into three, all of these different aspects of motherhood that children need and that they deserve. So when I talk about surrogacy specifically, I talk about how surrogacy splices what should be one person, mother, into three purchasable and optional women. So one of those mothers is the genetic mother, the woman who contributes her egg, the one that is responsible for 50% of the child's biological identity, the one that connects them to half of their lineage, the one that is going to allow them to have fellowship and enjoyment with a kinship network, an entire extended family. This is the one who, when the child grows older and they start to see a resemblance in the mirror, they say, oh, I look like my mom. Or maybe they'll be able to see a generational connection. I look like my grandmother, or I look like my grandfather. That can be and often is very, very precious to children. I think all of us have, as adults, look at the children that we've given birth to, and we see those resemblances, and we think there's something really special about this. Well, that resemblance and that genetic connection is also important to children. And so what surrogacy does, it allows us to separate that genetic mother and make her a purchasable commodity. If you want to get online right now, you can Google and search for egg donor catalogs, and you can filter your child's genetic mother down by a variety of different traits: her race, her nationality, her education, her hair color, her eye color, her education level, and you can literally shop for your child's genetic mother and then pay that woman to stay out of your child's life forever. So that genetic mother aspect for children is very important, because that mother, that woman, is half of the child's answer to the question, who am I? It's very hard for children to answer the question, who am I? If they can't answer the question, whose am I? And when children lose their mother through reproductive technologies, their genetic mother, it very often results in identity struggles or even an identity crisis. The second mother that reproductive technology cuts apart for us is the birth mother. This is the woman, the person, the only known entity for the child for the first 9 months of their development. They have a bond that is beyond intimate. It is almost inseparable from the child's very person. She is their entire world. Her voice, her smell, the rhythms of her bodies, the way that she is walking, the way that she is speaking, the language that she speaks. It is the only thing that the child knows. And on the day that the child is born, she is the only known quantity for the child. If any of you have had the privilege of giving birth, you probably know that immediately upon birth, where do they put the baby? They put the baby right on your chest as soon as possible. We don't put babies on the chests of random women or even the father first because we want them to form a bond. We put them on the mother's chest because they have an existing bond. It is a bond that we can measure. Babies need skin-to-skin contact to raise their oxytocin levels. Oxytocin is the only thing that will drop cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone that babies excrete when they are hungry or tired or sad or scared or cold. The cortisol goes up and the baby is in distress. The only thing that lowers cortisol rates is elevating oxytocin rates. And the birth mother's body does that better than anyone else because she is the only familiar thing in all the world to the child. And in the case of surrogacy, that birth mother very often is not the genetic mother. Sometimes the genetic mother is in the room and the baby is immediately handed off to her, the genetic mother. But in those first few hours and days and weeks, that genetic mother is just one of 8 billion strangers to the child. It is the birth mother that the baby wants. It is her smell, the breast milk that smells exactly like the amniotic fluid that the baby has been swimming in for 9 months, that cues the child into, this is the woman that is going to offer me security. And that is why it has a distinct impact on soothing children. That birth mother bond is critical as it relates to future trust and attachment. A lot of children who were conceived through surrogacy or adopted at birth report that they have struggled later on in life with fears of abandonment, worrying that people are going to suddenly leave them. And these children, we are told, have no idea that they're losing their birth mother, right? They don't know any different. The child's not going to remember. And yet it seems like they do. Their body seems to hold on to that primal wound of losing the only relationship they had the day that they are born. So children also need the birth mother. The third mother is the social mother. This is the woman who provides that daily maternal love every day, the kind of interaction with children that is totally distinct from the benefits and the input and the interactions that a male parent is going to give a child. Women interact differently with children. If I asked you to raise your hand if you'd ever seen a baby thrown up in the air, all of you would raise your hand. And if I told you to keep your hand up if the person throwing the baby was a woman, almost all of you would put your hands down. That's because women don't throw babies. Women wear babies. We constantly touch babies. We strap them to our bodies. We wear them around all day, whether we are cooking or on the phone or going for a walk or just cleaning the house. We strap them to our bodies and they need it. Mothers promote attachment in the ways that they interact with children. Fathers promote separation as they encourage risk-taking and they animate their play with kids and help them take on rough and tumble situations, whether it's climbing a tree or swinging an axe or wrestling in the living room. Fathers are going to promote separation in children. Mothers promote attachment. That mother, that female parent, that social mother, she talks to children differently than their fathers talk to children. She simplifies her words right down to the child's language so the baby understands pretty much everything mother is saying. Dads talk to their babies like they talk to everybody else. They use big words, 50% of which the child has no idea what dad is saying, but pushes children towards that cognitive development. Mothers are much more in tune with the immediate emotional needs of the child. Dads much more say, I don't care how you're feeling. You simply need to take out the garbage because I told you to. These two different ways of interacting with children, mothering and fathering, neither of them are optional in the life of the child. The baby, the toddler, the preschooler, the middle schooler, and the high schooler, they all need female love. They need a social mother, and they all need male love. They need their father. What surrogacy does is it allows you to say, which one of these three mothers do you not need? Do you not need the birth mother? You're going to come to us with the genetic mother, and that mother is going to take the baby home. You just need to rent out the birth mother. Great. Give us a couple tens of thousands of dollars, maybe $100,000, and you can rent out the birth mother. Maybe you are a single man, or maybe you're an infertile couple, and you need to purchase the child's genetic mother and also rent out the birth mother, and then the child will go home to maybe a social mother. Okay, so you only need to do away with two of the mothers. But maybe it's a single man or a same-sex couple or a male throuple, and they don't have an egg, they don't have a womb, and they're going to take the child home to a motherless house completely. Surrogacy says, no problem. We're not going to We don't care whether or not any of you are biologically related. We won't require any of you to undergo adoption screening. As long as you can pay the money to purchase the genetic mother, rent the birth mother, you can take that child home and starve them of maternal love for the rest of their life. So as a child advocate, when we're talking about the fragmentation of motherhood, that's what I think of. Our modern technologies have allowed us to do what all through the history of our species has been virtually impossible, which is the creation of a motherless baby. And it is time for all of us to understand the very serious risk that reproductive technologies, including surrogacy, pose to children, regardless of whether or not the people taking the baby home are genetically related, whether or not it's a man or a woman, whether or not they are single or married. Surrogacy genuinely fractures motherhood, and it always costs children something that they need. So I'll stop there. I know you have a lot of other wonderful panelists, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they all have to say.
Thank you very much, Katy. Thank you very much for a wonderful intervention. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me share with you.
¿Podemos contactar con Valerie Huber? Hello, Valerie. I remember meeting you in Frascati twice in New York City. Please, I will read your... Valerie Huber es la fundadora y presidenta de the Institute for Women's Health.
Valerie Huber is the president of Institute for Women's Health. From her institution, she pushes the priority of the global health of women with the aim of empowering them for them to thrive and to achieve optimal health outcomes from the first 1,000 days and all throughout their lives. Throughout her career, she has worked in public health policies at the Department of Health and Human Services of the United States, where she had different responsibilities, among others, interim assistant secretary for population issues and advisor and head of the cabinet of the health minister, assessing questions related to the health of women and teenagers. During the Trump administration, she was appointed the first special representative of the U.S. for global health of women. In her position, she was authorized to set the basis for the Geneva Consensus Declaration, international coalition pioneer of 40 countries committed to improve the health of women, strengthening families, and to say that there is no international right to abortion and protecting the sovereign rights of states to govern free from colonialism. She has a staunch commitment to the defense of life and the health of women.
Well, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you so much for including me in this closing session. And I regret that I couldn't be there in Spain, but I had a last minute conflict that prevented me from coming. But thank you so much for making it possible for me to join remotely to be with all of you. Well, not only when I served as U.S. Special Representative for Global Women's Health, but now as I'm honored to serve as the president of the Institute for Women's Health here in Washington, D.C., we've been working with governments in different parts of the world on policies that strengthen families and improve authentic health outcomes for women. And so today I want to share what we have learned from nations and what we have discovered by talking to nations who are choosing progress over decline. I am sure that throughout the day, there has been a discussion about the human consequences to fractured motherhood. And I think that the person who spoke just before me, Katy, just did an excellent job of breaking down what that looks like with surrogacy. I'd like to be clear also about some additional consequences. And the first is involuntary childlessness. I say it's involuntary childlessness because here in the United States, our birth rates just hit a historic low, and they are now at just a little bit over 1.5 children per woman. That's far below the 2.1 that is needed to maintain population. And about half of the women reach age 30 without children, and about half of those will never become mothers, often not by choice, but because they didn't know the fertility window was closing and it was real. It's a tragedy, and I repeatedly see women spend their 20s unaware that fertility declines significantly after 30, and it falls off the cliff after 35. What's supposed to be just a few more years becomes permanent, not by choice, but because they're not informed. So when society talks to women and tells them that they can have it all at any timeline, we're not expanding choices for them. We're stealing them by withholding that biological truth. So that's the first thing. The second is loneliness and alienation. The culture tells women that motherhood will destroy their dreams, tells men, and the culture tells men that they are inconsequential. So young people delay partnerships so long that biology makes the choice for them. And the family itself that has continued for generations simply ends. And this isn't just a problem in America. Spain, and indeed much of the world, faces similar pressures and problems. Even in Africa, where the country of Mauritius plummeted from 6.03, I think, children in the 1950s per woman to 1.22 today, an 80% decrease in that amount of time. The third is the research. Perhaps you've already talked about this today, but the research shows that children in two-parent families, Katy also kind of mentioned this, outperform. They outperform their peers academically, economically, behaviorally. Married couples build more wealth, live longer, report higher happiness, and yet we systematically undermine these partnerships through false dichotomies, pitting women against children, career against family, freedom against fertility. If we can look at slide 3, I forgot to say when to advance, but it looks like you're right on top. The fact is that when we're talking about policies, government programs can't do it alone. And if we try to do it just by government programs, there has not been an instance to show that that will work. More than 50% of the world's countries are below replacement rate. And most of those countries recognize that they're in a demographic crisis. We're beginning to recognize that in the US. I've known it for many years, but now there is a public media presence about this issue, and hopefully we'll see some changes here in policies, but it has to go beyond that. A lot of governments have tried corrective policies and financial incentives, parental leave, housing subsidies, childcare support. Most of them have failed to really make a difference. And why is that? Well, I believe that it's because government programs alone can't overcome a culture that fundamentally devalues the family. When a society tells young people that parenthood is a burden, that children limit your potential, that marriage is outdated, there's no amount of financial incentives that can compete with that message. You can't bribe people into building families or having children that they have been taught their entire growing up years to fear or dismiss. So the mindset shift has to begin first, or at least alongside policy. That's the first recommendation. Prioritizing the family begins at the cultural level, and then national and local policies can make it easier to choose family, but they can't make people want it. That requires a cultural transformation. Well, Hungary is one of the few countries that I have seen that are attempting both the cultural transformation plus the supportive policy simultaneously. Yes, they've implemented significant financial support, zero income tax for families with a certain number of children. They have forgiven loans for newlyweds for every child. They've subsidized homes and cars. They've made it easier for women to have both a career and children. But more importantly, I think they've worked to transform how their entire society talks about family. You can't deplane in Budapest before you ever touch the soil without knowing that they are a family-friendly country. They've shifted the narrative from parenthood as a burden to parenthood as a blessing, from children as obstacles to children as an investment in the future. The results, we still don't know the end of the story, but fertility rates have surged about 30%. Marriages have doubled. Divorces have fallen by about a quarter. Abortions have nearly halved. And so they are attempting something that only 3 countries out of 47 have achieved since 1950. And that is rebounding in a meaningful way from below replacement fertility. Now, Hungary still faces challenges, and their approach won't necessarily translate exactly into all concepts, but I believe that they have understood something that's fundamental, that you need both the cultural appreciation of family and the practical policies that make that family formation feasible. Next slide, please. So let's look at practical approaches, both at the cultural level and all the way to the community level. What does this reconstruction really look like? I'd like to offer just a few concrete approaches at different levels. At the international level, there's tremendous international pressure on countries. You probably all know that, maybe have experienced it yourself. So I would assert that this affects every nation attempting pro-life or pro-family policies. 5 years ago,
should be made, period.
5 years ago, 6 nations created the Geneva Consensus Declaration, committing to promote optimal health for women, strengthening the family, reaffirming there's no international right to abortion, and protecting national sovereignty. Today, there are 40 countries representing 2.5 billion people. Why? Well, because alone, nations face enormous pressure to adopt progressive policies that will be their undoing. And they're conditions to aid or trade. Together, they can resist. Well, in 2025, the United States just rejoined under President Trump in the first 100 hours. And last October, 50 nations gathered in Washington for the coalition's 5th anniversary. We had keynotes by the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, foreign ambassadors, members of Congress, and even a letter from President Trump applauding this effort. I think it shows us that a political declaration can rewrite the global narrative about national priorities and reject false ideologies. And the more member countries, the stronger that voice becomes. Our goal is to increase it from those 40 countries to 80 in the next 3 years. And so if your country isn't yet a member, I think this is the start to beginning something internationally in this 5th year that no one can ignore and can change the cultural narrative. The next slide takes it a little bit broader in a way, and that's talking about the cultural level. This priority has to begin with a narrative that's translated to the community level, to the family level, to the faith-based level, to the individual level. And it is that cultural messaging. And the first thing we have to do is tell young people the truth about fertility. This is a fundamental. As part of Protego model where we work with countries, we're partnering to create educational frameworks that provide biological facts about fertility alongside building skills for healthy relationships and marriage and the importance of committed parents. Faith leaders then can come alongside and amplify this reach through sympathetic messaging. Business leaders can do the same. Parents and families have to be empowered and given the tools to talk about difficult topics and things that they may not even be aware of, with confidence, without drama. And so for that purpose, that's why we created Protego Thrive that's adaptable. I'll never forget that in one country, government officials told us something really striking and very discouraging in a way. They told us that there had never been an NGO that had wanted partnership with them without pushing abortion or other ideological priorities that were foreign to their values. And we cannot dismiss that this cultural messaging that must be changed is fueled by lots of money, lots of international organizations, lots of progressive foundations, other countries pressuring aid-dependent countries. It is quite a web, but telling the truth to people in all ways possible can change that. I am convinced. This isn't about pressuring motherhood. It's ending the tragedy of uninformed choice. Women deserve to know, couples deserve to know that fertility is not infinite, that biology has timelines so they can make genuinely informed choice. The second cultural imperative is to challenge those false narratives. Universities, media, faith communities, and the civil society must actively counter the message that women must choose between achievement and family. Some of the most accomplished women in history were mothers. We have to celebrate this multifaceted opportunity that women have or could have, including but not excluding motherhood. And third, in this cultural messaging, we have to engage men. The culture has told men that they are inconsequential to family life, and it's not true. It's devastating. Strong families require engaged fathers, and we have to rebuild that understanding of fatherhood, that it's noble, it's essential, and it's worthy of honor. Next slide. Let's look briefly at a couple of examples at the national level. So countries should consider treating families as essential infrastructure because, frankly, a nation rises and falls upon the strength of its family and the replenishment of its population. So part of the reconstruction involves looking at what is being taught to the next generation, how we are determining tax policy, parental leave, workplace flexibility, all of those things, plus more. And that's why we put such a priority on partnering with countries with Protego so we can join with nationwide resources for all sectors, beginning with parents. Here in the United States, you probably know that Congress passed President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, and it included two things that were really significant for encouraging families. One was increased tax credits for parents with children, and the second was something really unique here in the United States, and that was beginning a baby savings account that the United States would begin for each newborn with $1,000, and then employers and parents could add to that account without a tax penalty. And I am sure that I know there are many other creative things at the national level, but in the interest of time, I'll just leave it at those. The next slide talks about the local level. And I'd like to really address something that I just pointed to briefly, and that was to address one of the most persistent false dichotomies, and that's the supposed dichotomy between work and family. I can't tell you how many young women often believe that they have to choose between career success or family, becoming a mother, getting married. And it's a lie. But it's a lie that feels true because oftentimes policies can make that integration nearly impossible. So rebuilding a culture that welcomes life requires some really intentional things that can make family integration not just theoretically possible, but actually practically achievable. And I'll just give just a handful of ideas for this. One, require fertility education as a part of health curriculum so that young people understand biological realities even before they are thinking about having children themselves. It's just a part of health knowledge. Second, mobilize universities and civil societies to shift the cultural narratives around motherhood and family. We have an uphill battle there, but we have to do it. Next, create support systems that make choosing family practically feasible, not just celebrated in theory. Next, we have to challenge the ideal worker myth that the best employees don't have any family responsibilities. And there are many, many more examples, but in the interest of time, I'll stop there. Next slide. I finally want to address the crisis of hopelessness that prevents family formation, even when those practical barriers are eliminated. You know, I think it's important to say that young people are hungry for meaning, for purpose, authentic relationships. They are discovering that this radical autonomy leads to loneliness, and we have to offer them something better, a vision where freedom includes freedom to form families and begin legacies that last. Second, many young people fundamentally doubt whether bringing children into the world is a responsible choice. And we have to restore hope. And that requires intentionality. That includes several things. And again, this is not a full list, but I wanted to be sensitive to the time. First, we have to have those honest but hopeful framing. We have to acknowledge that there are real challenges right now, but we have to reject despair because every generation has faced its own set of what they consider to be existential threats. The current generation is the current generation is no exception to that, but we have to infuse hope in that conversation. Next, we have to demonstrate societal commitment. When governments invest in pro-family policies, they're signaling confidence in the future, perhaps even more than the specific policies themselves. Next, we have to celebrate generativity. We have to shift priorities toward establishing and building the next generation, and having children is the ultimate act of that hope, I believe. Next, we have to provide purpose beyond self. Any of us who are parents know that parenthood offers profound meaning. Raising the next generation, passing on values, and then passing the baton. Finally, we have to counter apocalyptic narratives. Children are not burdens. It's not easy, but they are the reason we solve challenges. When we rebuild a culture that welcomes life, restores hope, reconciles work and family, fosters selflessness rather than selfishness, we can't think of these as separate goals. They are interconnected. Workplace solutions mean nothing if the culture devalues family. Cultural celebration means nothing if achieving professional success requires abandoning children. The best policies mean nothing if we undervalue mothers, discard fathers, and we abandon the intrinsic worth of every human life. So Reconstruction really requires all of it, and it requires courage, because building a culture of life in an age of death, it's countercultural work, but it's essential. But here's what I've learned in this. When nations commit to this work, change can happen. Not overnight, not easily, but it can happen. Demographic collapse is not inevitable. But I have to say, we all know that this requires more than good intentions. It requires comprehensive transformation, has to include cultural, practical, national, local, institutional, individual, all working together. Next slide. The question isn't whether we can do this. The question is whether we will do this. And we have to choose quickly, because biology doesn't wait for politics. 40 nations have already chosen to stand together in the International Geneva Consensus Declaration. More needs to join. Young people are hungry for a better vision. I believe there in Spain at that conference and in conversations around the world, the momentum is building. The question for every nation, every institution, every community, every individual here today is simply this: how will you participate in this reconstruction? We at the Institute for Women's Health are ready to partner with any nation, any leader committed to this work, because ultimately this isn't about reversing demographic trends or implementing better policies. It's really about whether our civilization is going to flourish or fade. It's whether the next generation will inherit a culture that welcomes them, supports them, and gives them reason to hope. I think the choice is ours, and I'm so glad that you called this conference and so pleased to be a part. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Valerie. Pregunto al equipo técnico si se puede mantener a Katy Faust y Valerie.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And now I would like to know if we could have Katy and Valerie with us. I don't know if that's possible. Thank you. So now let's continue with the rest of panelists. Kristina, Zamarytė-Sakavičienė, Vice Minister of Justice in with specialty in law, mediation, and forensic. Her trajectory combines administrative functions as well as counseling functions, and she has also worked as counselor for the Seimas in 2 different stages until 2025. Between 2007 and 2010, she exercised as well the role of best practices officer, depending on the health ministry, and CEO has also acted as professor. Then she became the director for the Free Society Institute between 2016 to 2020, and she has also become part of an organization based on Catholic values. In 2025, she participated as well at the Justice Leaders Forum of the OCD.
Thank you, Luis, for introduction. I wanted to ask, could you please my slides on? Put my slides on. I sent to Paloma, yes, and she said that everything is all right. So, okay, so let's start without the slides, but I thought that some of them would be interesting to you. Okay. Well, it's a great honor for me to be here, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for the invitation and for their hospitality, and also to all the speakers for their valuable insights. I think I will have to repeat and to emphasize some of them because, well, many good things are already told. And my special thanks go to Katy Faust, whose child-centric vision has deeply shaped my own and which I tried to bring into Lithuanian politics. Yes, I'm a mother of 6, and now I serve as a Vice Minister of Justice in Lithuania. I'm responsible for shaping the legislative policy. But today I speak simply as a person who cares about our shared future. And you will find a slide. Oh, yes. Okay. Will you? Oh, okay. Thank you. It looks like Lithuania is competing for a world record in demographic decline. Yes, because we are such a small country, only 2.5 million, and only 70,500 children were born last year. 10 years earlier, it was more than 30,000, and according to estimates, total fertility rate in 2025 was 1.0. There are many explanations for why we are becoming a world of one-child families. Our neighbors in Latvia conducted a very interesting study. Laura Pirsko and her colleagues asked college students the very same questions about life priorities in 2004 and then again in 2022. And the results were striking. In 2004, family and children ranked third among their life priorities, and after 18 years, they had fallen to the 22nd place. Well, we all see that family and children are not the life aspiration of young people anymore. In the end, the issue of demography comes down to a question: what do we consider a meaningful life? To answer, let us look from the perspective of the fruitful, because in a world of one-child families, there is still a minority that quietly chooses a radically different path. The Economist and a mother of 8, Catherine Pakaluk, conducted an unusual study. She did not investigate why so few children are born, but why some women consciously choose to have many children, even if they have good career opportunities. Pakaluk interviewed highly educated women raising 5 or more children in the United States. Her conclusion is very sober. These women understand that the cost of the child is not only money. They see that the cost includes time, comfort, sleep, career opportunities, freedom, and often a disapproval of the world. Pakaluk describes a common denominator among the educated mothers she interviewed. These women speak about dying to self, about constant hard work, but also about the fact that nevertheless they experience an unexpected return, more joy, more maturity, deeper faith, and even becoming oneself, discovering one's true identity. For them, a family becomes the family with a big F, and the meaning not an abstraction, but a daily, obvious experience of life. So what could encourage more women to recognize the beauty of motherhood and to freely enter this difficult adventure? As it was mentioned before, we see, and several well-regarded meta-studies have demonstrated that pronatal fiscal and labor market policies to have mixed, tempo, or insignificant effects. One of the reasons for inconclusive results concerns the demand side of pronatal policies. Government efforts are unlikely to result in more births if social cultural environment incentivizes low fertility. In short, political incentives are important because they make life of families easier, but they cannot create a desire to have children. In a famous line of research examining cultural influences on fertility explores the role of religion as a significant factor in childbearing decisions. For example, Kaufman demonstrates that religious fundamentalism is constantly related to higher fertility rates in Abrahamic religions. It is possible that demographic advantage can be sustained even among moderately devout believers, as it was shown by Vobolevičius and Genys. It is not surprising that also in Pakaluk's study, almost all the mothers raising 5 or more children were believers, even though she tried to select her population that would represent the whole American population. What does it mean in the context of this conference? Not that the state should produce believers or impose a state religion. Rather, it shows that a sense of meaning is a precondition for demographic courage. In other words, when your whole life is at stake, no temporal incentive can tip the balance. Only what you love more than you love yourself can do that. God, your spouse, and your children. State policy cannot create meaning, but it can create the conditions of dignity and freedom that can help to discover that meaning. At this point, I would like to mention several key directions, not as a list of technical measures, but as a value-based and legal framework for renewing hope. First, respect of religion. Governments must recognize that religions as communities that reveal the meaning of life and teach people to live for something beyond themselves help families endure the sacrifices that having children requires. States must respect freedom of religion as a fundamental right that belongs to every person. In the West, freedom of religion is protected in national constitutions. However, in practice application of anti-discrimination frameworks sometimes leaves insufficient room for freedom of religion. Another crucial right is parents' rights to educate children according to their moral convictions. Parents have a primary duty to care for, to raise, and to educate their children. But some contemporary approaches risk treating education of children as a matter of state policy, as if state had ultimate authority. And who wants to consider themselves as producers of children for the state? In short, when religious freedom and parents' rights are secure, families have a moral and civic space to self-gift. Family as a unit. Although we speak today about crisis of motherhood, overcoming it requires moving beyond fragmented family policy that fails to treat family as a unit. Children's rights and well-being, women's rights and well-being cannot be treated in isolation. Marriage should not be quietly downgraded to the level of alternative living arrangements. These goods reinforce one another, and most reliably, mothers and children thrive when there is a committed father who is both a husband and a parent. Differentiation. A worrying trend is that under the principle of equality, boundaries between the natural married family and other forms of cohabitation are being erased. Of course, it is a basic principle that all people are equal in their dignity and their human rights, but justice requires that we treat equal situations equally and different situations differently. States facing demographic decline should give distinctive recognition to married families of a man and woman, especially those raising many children, and strengthening their stability, economic security, and autonomy. Favorable culture is very important, as we mentioned today. Public policy should use its levers, education system, state-funded cultural projects, and public broadcasters to help restore social prestige of motherhood and strengthen family stability. We need to renew respect for marital commitment. We should show young adults that marriage is not the opposite of freedom. It's freedom's mature form, a freely chosen, stable relationship that helps its members to flourish. And research shows that stable marriages are also a condition for larger families. Our culture already understands something important, that we cannot grow without sacrifice or pain. People climb mountains, endure icy water, or follow demanding diets to seek challenges that transform them. We need to speak out loud that motherhood is the most powerful and most meaningful way of transformation, a school of love, strength, and self-gift. We should publicly honor mothers no less than we honor politicians, business leaders, or academics. And when society truly values those who give life, and when women can take pride in motherhood without apology, then more women will feel free to welcome the children they desire. One important note is that we must seek these cultural changes wisely and with sensitivity, so that our well-intentioned efforts do not take the tone of propaganda. And we should never cross the line where demography becomes a pretext to turn a family into a tool, a woman into an instrument, and a child into a product. No to initiatives that undermine meaning. Law is the teacher of culture. Laws form what we consider normal and valuable. We need to think what message we send with our legislative initiatives. In my own country, as happened in many Western states, we feel strong pressure to redefine family by erasing sexual differences. When the state treats the differences between man and woman, husband and wife, mother and father as irrelevant, it quietly suggests that a family is primarily about the desires of adults, but not about children. Legislative initiatives in demographic crisis should lead in the opposite direction, to cherish natural family of man and woman, to encourage marriage, to protect human life from the beginning, and to guarantee quality help for women experiencing crisis pregnancies. We don't have the time for this important OSCE report. Oh, there had to be a picture. Okay. And the last personal note. My family has visited Spain about 5 times, and this is a picture of a few Lithuanian families near Ciudad. And every time we noticed one concrete difference, a nuanced one. In Lithuania, society is less friendly to children, and families and parents feel uneasy in public spaces, and they do not receive support or help they need. So when I see a young mother with a small child, I try to approach her and tell her a few nice words, and also I tell her that I almost envy her because I miss having a small baby at home. I have 6, and I would gladly welcome one more. This admission is always met with a big astonishment. How do you manage? Well, of course I tell that raising children can be very exhausting, but also it brings meaning and a true happiness because every child is such an immense treasure. And I must confess that I secretly hope it leaves a mark, because from my experience I know that the joy of a large family can be inspiring and it can spread. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristina. Thank you very much indeed. Enikö Gyori es doctora en Relaciones Internacionales, con especialidad en Asuntos Europeos por la Universidad de Economía de Budapest. Ha desarrollado su labor académica como investigadora en el Departamento de Estudios Europeos de la Universidad Nacional de Administración.
Developed her work at the university, the International University as Public Administration, and has also a very vast experience as ambassador in Hungary from 1999 to 2003, and later ambassador in Madrid in 2014 to 2019. I do remember her from that time, and she was an incredible ambassador, I must say. And she has also been MP at the European Parliament until 2024, and between 2010 and 2024, she was also the Secretary of State for the European Union for European Affairs, and she is also experienced when it comes to coordination, and she was the coordinator for the Centro Europa Libre and the Savat and the working group for Fidesz in the European Parliament. She has been a member since 2021, and she has also developed her functions in the civil administration. She has also been a member of the Civic Association in Hungary, and since 2022, she is also part of the Congress for Hungarian Foreign Affairs, and she is also part of Enikö. She has been recognized by different condecorations internationally, between them and among them. Well, Hungarians are absolutely incredible people. They talk every language and they can speak every language, and she will be addressing for you all in Spanish, in fact.
Soy la última que va a hacer una intervención. De veras no quería robarles a ustedes más tiempo a esta hora. Muchas gracias a las dos señoras que han hecho la intervención desde su despacho, desde su casa. Un placer. Y muchas gracias también a las palabras muy emocionantes de la viceministra. Y les digo que como yo ahora eurodiputada vengo de un entorno muy contra las familias.
Me, as a member of parliament, I work in an environment which is very much against families. The European Parliament discussing family is not a natural element. And reports about how to improve life conditions in Europe, families, is not a popular topic. And what I would like to share with you in a kind of telegraphic manner, in the interest of time, is the experiment, or what we've been doing in Hungary for the last 16 years. Thank you very much to Valerie for having mentioned that we, in our cultural and economic policies, families are at the center of this policy, because the motherhood in crisis, this is not a biological question, but a combination of life conditions, perceived risk, vital decisions and cultural decisions, as it has been mentioned here before. And what is our objective? Our objective has never been a demographic miracle without improving the real conditions for the decisions to have children. We don't have an institute researching on this topic. It has been seen that young people in general want to have children, at least 2 children. When these young people are asked, I'm referring to people between 20 or 30 years of age, they answer that they want to have children. And for some reason, a part of those desired children are never born. Therefore, we want to research on the reasons why those children are not eventually born. When we reached government back in 2010, we changed the philosophy, we changed social policies, and actually we wanted to build a society based on work. Well, we know that that is not difficult. Everyone who is in a condition to work should work, and if you work, you should be better off than if you live only on subsidies. If you live well on subsidies without working, it's not good. That was the case in the socialist area. What was the fertility rate in 2010? It was about 1.25, very low the replacement level, which is 2.1. The number of births were 9.9 per 1,000 inhabitants, with a stagnant trend. And at that time, having a child could lead to significant financial risk, lack of possibilities to balance work life, and women, as a result of that, were delaying the age when they had the first child. That's the reason why we put together a pro-family policy. When you put together your policy, you need to take into consideration the impact that your policy may have. This is a horizontal approach. Which are the main principles? Subsidies are tied to work. we need to do long-term forecasts. Instruments and tools need to be adapted to different life stages. Results. Since 2010 till 2021, birth rate increased from 1.6 points, but replacement rate was not achieved. Had it been achieved, it would have been a miracle. The expense, that was expensive, yet this is an investment in the future. Pro-family policies are a future investment. We spent 5% of our GDP on these type of policies. Lots of money, but an investment for the future. Also, rebates. This is not a fixed aid, but in proportional help, 25 euros per child, and if there are 2 children in the family, 50 euros per kid, and if there are 3 children, personal income tax may be reduced down to 0%. Extension and income tax has been extended to mothers with more than 4 children. They are exempted from paying income tax all their life, and mothers below 30 years of age will not pay these taxes. And mothers with children do not pay for this tax either. And since January 2026, mothers of 2 children do not pay for the income tax. This is a gradual introduction of tax rebates that we are doing in terms of balancing work and life. We do have a number of state subsidies for young mothers with babies. They are accountable to get 100% of their salary during the first 6 months. Up until the child becomes 2 years of age, they also receive part of their salaries, and they can do both. Go to work while continue to receive that subsidy. This is a way to help mothers balance work and child raising. The novelty was for grandparents to receive the subsidies. If the mother decides to go back to work 100%, the grandmother or the grandfather can stay at home and receive the subsidy that I've just mentioned. Another important element in Hungary, and I guess in many countries of the world, including Spain, is help to accommodation. Aid to accommodation are main pillar. Since 2012, we've been having programs for that. And here, the loan that we offer is very important. We give that loan to couples that commit to have 1, 2, or 3 children. And those who eventually have 3 children, a significant part of this loan is no longer repayable. And the last measure we have just introduced is a loan at 3% fixed interest rate for couples to buy their first home despite their age. And we have also doubled the number of vacancies at preschool, which is a highly important help for families. Energy costs, the state participates in those energy costs in a manner that families can afford paying for the energy costs.
energéticos. Otro tema, porque aquí se habló bastante de la parte mentalidad-cultura.
Here, lots have been said about mindset and the culture, and I believe that is the most difficult element. It is here where the state cannot really force things. If that is done, it could be counterproductive. Yet, what we did in Hungary was a new constitution. We were the last country of the former Soviet Union bloc that could not embrace a new constitution. We had amended some parts of the constitution, but in 2012 we had a new constitution. In that new constitution, many breakthrough elements were included. For instance, that a marriage takes place between a man and a woman. Nowadays, we know that this is not very habitual. Often we are criticized, especially in Brussels. And later on, we added that the father is a man and that the mother is a woman. Another revolution, which I believe that this is what nature and our biology says. But because of the gender philosophy that we unfortunately have around in Europe nowadays, introducing what we introduced in our constitution was an actual revolution. And we also adopted a law, as the Deputy Minister mentioned, established that education is the right as well as the responsibility of parents. No one else can establish that or have a word about the education of children. And organizations are not all the organizations are banned from intervening or engaging in that, because that is the duty and responsibility of parents. So we've been having or seeing trends since COVID. However, some of them are getting worse. We are analyzing the problem. We believe that COVID has a significant impact, and we are very close to the war. We are neighbors to Ukraine, and couples need to feel safe.
Estamos examinando estas razones. Yo creo que culturalmente aún
we are looking into the reasons why. As long as we create a pro-family environment, you will see if you visit Budapest that this is a family-oriented country, and that all families and visitors are welcome, but we know that these are things that cannot change, are not changed overnight. Now I will move on to conclusions. If pro-family policy is consistent, demographic indicators can improve in the long term. However, the policy alone will not reverse the deeper structural demographic trends overnight. And the state has a responsibility, a clear responsibility, to actively support motherhood and fatherhood, and to do that in the highest number of fields: fiscal policy, housing, accommodation, and services and help. Family policy is not a sectoral element, it is a horizontal element. It is a sign, is the warning. The demographic and cultural environment in Europe is declining, and no member states alone can give an answer to the complex crisis impacting the West. Countries could offer a good example and functional solutions. And I believe it will be very important to learn from good practices that are performing well in countries. Answers to demographic challenges should not focus on migration. That is a clear response and something that we have always supported in my country. We need to support families always and creating a social, predictable and sustainable economic environment, meaning that having children should not entail the deterioration of the actual family. Having children should not be a risk, but a real-life option. We can discuss that what we have achieved, whether it is a lot or not, yet I think we are on the right way. But actually, figures clearly show us that hadn't we have implemented pro-family policies in the last 16 years, 200,000 children would not have been born in my country. This is an outstanding important figure because our country has less than 10 million people. Therefore, our commitment with pro-family policies has stayed because it is the best possible investment that any country can make. Thank you. Thank you so much, Enikö. Now let us open a Q&A for those who may have any questions or comments. You may address your questions to Valerie, Enikö, or Kristina. Is abortion allowed in Hungary? Yes, it is allowed, but we do not promote it. Constitution establishes that life is protected since conception. Up until week 12, abortion is legal. Mother is told about the different alternatives. And 2 years ago, we introduced a norm establishing that the mom needs to listen to the heartbeat of the embryo before receiving an abortion. I cannot really tell you about the reduction that we had in abortions, but I can tell you that abortion has been significantly reduced.
We appreciate it very much. Bueno, me corresponde hacer un pequeño resumen de las intervenciones.
Now it is my time to make a brief summary of our presentation. I think above the downgrading of motherhood and the family, we can all start to see that many things are changing, especially when it comes to young people, the future, valuing of family, looking for transcendence and religion, tiredness of egotism. We are at a world where the circumstances that we are seeing today were unimaginable. 50 years ago, China wants to become the first economy in the world. I just don't know whether you know that 20% of Chinese young people would never find a woman because of the elective abortions that have been practiced as a result of the single-child policy. There is a reluctance for Islam through the strong fertility or policy they have. There is a reluctance for them to dominate Europe. I think radical Islamism is making a huge mistake. It is getting rid of 50% of society, that is to say women which are the most intelligent, the bravest, the most committed, as we have seen here through the day of today. In the Western world, we see more pets. In the past, we referred to them as dogs, more pets than dogs, and that is a tragedy. But all that can be turned around. We we need to promote pro-family policies and also promoting a cultural change, starting off by telling the truth to young people. We need to move forward with hope. 2.5 years ago, Familia and Dignidad Humana organized in this very same CEU University a seminar known as US United States, the abortion is no longer a right. Here, we had, at that seminar, we had legal experts, politicians, media representatives, and what it stayed with me after that seminar, after a battle of 50 years, what it remained on me was never give up. And that is absolutely valid for the defense and recognition and acknowledgement of motherhood and the family. Thank you, everyone. This seminar is closed. May I say something? Of course. When I finished my mandate as an ambassador here back in 2019, now I'm coming back to Spain. You know which is the biggest difference that I've seen since 2019 in Spain? There are many more places to leave pets, kindergartens for pets. I hadn't seen that in Madrid 6 years ago, but now I do not see any more kindergartens for children. I wish someday, sometime, when I come back to Spain, I will see the opposite situation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.